So welcome to the Tory Burch Foundation webinar, The Reinvention and State of Small Business. I'm Laurie Fabiano, the president of the Tory Burch Foundation, filling in for our COO, Gabrielle McGee. So COVID has had a really disproportionate effect on small businesses, particularly women and minority-owned small businesses, making the need for agility, resiliency, and reinvention really, really critical. Today, we're going to address the ways that business owners can pivot if necessary and find new sources of funding while they reinvent themselves. And to discuss it, we have honestly three of the most powerhouse women on the planet. It's such my pleasure to introduce them now. Michelle Sourie Robinson, who is the president and CEO of the Michigan Minority Supplier Development Council. Geri Stengel, who's the founder and CEO of Youre, and Nina Vaca, the chairman and CEO of the Pinnacle Group. Welcome, ladies. I am so grateful that you are here. And for our listeners, honestly, I could kill the entire hour if I gave you their credentials. So if you don't know these women, you need to. And I'm going to encourage you after the webinar to Google them and learn more about them so that we can dive right in. So we've heard stories about entrepreneurs pivoting during this crisis. But what does that actually mean? I do have some examples of Tory Burch Foundation fellows that have done that. We have Caitlin Murphy of Global Gateways Logistics, who focused on getting PPP exactly where it was needed. Since people can't travel, Catalina Mayorga of El Camino Travel hosts these incredible virtual salons with her travel partners from around the world. And Christina Fagan of Shit That I Knit, can't get a better name, started selling do-it-yourself knitting kits in addition to her merchandise. Those are just a few examples that just show that in the midst of this pandemic, we're seeing some real creativity, which brings me to my first question for you all. Yes, times are unbelievably tough, and we're going to get into that. But is this also a time of innovation? Is this a chance to reset? And full disclosure, Michelle and Geri and I were talking ahead of time, and she started just talking about this topic anyway, and it was so beautiful. I'm like, okay, Michelle, you're first.
Well, I have to say, I truthfully, in this crisis, there are many opportunities, and you just talked about some of them. The knitting company that identified new markets. And one of the things that I remind people often is if you look at the 2008 economic recession and that downturn, and you look at the number of businesses that, quite frankly, most of us had never heard of until then, that are now powerhouses within their industries, it creates for us a blueprint as to what can result from this. And I think you have many business owners that aren't simply looking at what's immediately before them, but they're looking down the road, and they're looking at how they leverage things like the U.S. trade agreement. When you look at the Mexico-Canada trade agreement, what opportunities does that offer for you that now opens up the ability for you to serve and provide products or services that help in that supply chain? So I think there are many limitless opportunities, especially for women and minority-owned firms.
Nina, how about you?
I am sitting here as a living, breathing example of exactly what Michelle said. Pinnacle was founded in 1996, and we were founded at the right time within the industry. We provide IT labor. There was a lot of need and demand in the marketplace. But as you know, our first recession came right after that. And so we found ourselves as a 5-year-old company in what was a growing, thriving industry, starting to really go downhill to the point of being in a liquidation plan. And so to Michelle's point, we were that company that had to not just pivot, completely transform and adapt to what the marketplace was buying. And I would say my two pieces of information in that context would be a student of the industry. And that's what Michelle was talking about. Be a student of what resources are out there for you. Understand your industry so well, and things that are impacting your industry, whether they be agreement, like the NAFTA agreement, or whether it be a customer, So understand and be a student of your industry. The second thing is relationships matter. Lean on those relationships. For us as a very small business, I remember being down to 4 employees and 4 contractors at the time, and really leaning into those companies to mentor and sponsor and advocate, and looking to speak to people and understand how we can transform. That was really valuable, because nothing happens until somebody gives you an opportunity. And I'm living proof of it.
So Nina, just to give our audience a little bit of hope, how many employees do you have now?
Oh goodness, okay. The time period I was talking about, in 2002, in the year 2000, after 9/11, we were down to 4 consultants. Today, Pinnacle has a footprint in 10 countries. We're a global company. We just recently opened up Mexico, Argentina, in Chile last year. Before that, it was Ireland. Today, we have thousands of contractors across 10 countries.
There is hope after reinvention. There's one of our main things. Geri, how about you? How do you see this time? Like, what's the status of entrepreneurship in America right now?
So I'm actually going to take it from a different approach, and never let a crisis go to waste. So this is a wonderful time for legislation. So when I look at the disparities, so I do research, I do writing on women's entrepreneurship, the 2 critical things that I think women entrepreneurs need to really succeed is affordable childcare and paid family leave. Now, paid family leave, that may not sound, if you think about it for employees, that's different than what I mean in this particular case. So if your significant other has paid leave, it enables the woman entrepreneur to take time off when she has a child. So there are legislative things to be done, and all I can say is vote, vote, vote. For me, it's a little bit different. I can research, and I can get the word out, because I can write about the disparities, the research in Forbes.
Right. And where are we any way closer to getting that? I feel like we've been saying this for a long time. Do you think this upheaval will allow us to get there?
Only if we take very specific action. So when we were coming out of the 2008 recession, 2007 recession, the gap got worse for minority women entrepreneurs. So over the last few years, the gap actually grew as opposed to closed. And again, there's real reasons why women-owned businesses, in particular women of color, need support. And some of that is that they're what I call flexibility entrepreneurs. So they have caregiving responsibility. And those businesses are working typically part-time or sidepreneurs. So if they had affordable childcare, they could work either longer hours or full-time. Got
it. Just to get back a little bit into the invention and the creative stage here, Nina, you're perfect. You already talked about how you did this years ago and reinventing your own company. What advice would you have for companies that are saying, you know what, I do need to reinvent, but I don't really know how to go about that?
So just quickly, I just want to acknowledge what Geri is saying. I have great respect and admiration for people who dedicate their lives to the advancement of others, and Geri is that person. She was the first to write about me in Forbes magazine many moons ago. And so what you do matters. What we do matters. What we're doing at the Tory Burch Foundation today matters. Our voice and to communicate and to have the ripple effect for other women and minority-owned businesses, I think really does. So thank you for that. How did I do it? I think it starts with a mindset, to be quite candid. Being a student of your industry, as I mentioned, entrepreneurs have a way of finding ways or seeing things where others don't. And so it begins with a mindset. You can have the mindset that the glass is half empty, or you could have the mindset of, let's not let a crisis go to waste. For me, it's been about first centering myself into the mindset of what is possible, believing and surrounding myself with people that think alike, in many ways that think, have diverse thinking, but are all within the same goal. I'm one of these people that's about the long game. I always think about the long plan. I understand and I'm conscious of the realities that are happening today, but I have wavering faith in the future. So I think it begins with your mindset. It's very powerful.
Your mindset, and I think also how you tell your own story. And Michelle, you've talked about that a lot, the importance of women entrepreneurs telling their own stories. Why is that?
You know, I think one of the things that we start to do is we as women sometimes decide that we're going to operate like men. And part of what we miss in that is the vulnerability of really telling your story as an entrepreneur. I've heard Nina tell her story. And when you hear her story, it's compelling. When I first met Nina, I was a corporation that invited her in and helped her connect with our executives that were buying what she was selling, the services she was providing. But part of my connection with her was understanding her story. So I think the takeaway for me with women is we are powerful. If you look at what we've been able to do in terms of multitasking just to take care of those around us, I appreciated Geri's comments about the caretaker kind of syndrome. But we still manage to juggle and to get that done while running amazing businesses. And I think at the end of the day, part of our superpower is in telling that story so that people know it's not just another business to make money, but most of us, intrinsic within that, certainly we want to drive thriving businesses that add value to our customers, but we also want to make a difference in the lives of our employees and their families and the communities around us.
And so speaking of stories, Geri, you've been writing about a lot of these stories of reinvention. Are there any that have stuck with you or you think that we could learn from?
Not all of them are reinvention. Sometimes it's just aligning your values. So today's story is about Julia Cheek of Everlywell, and she saw this as a moment. They do home medical testing, and the company saw this as a moment to do corona home testing, and it wasn't quite as easy as it sounds. So the FDA didn't have the rules in place to allow that to happen. So they actually had to work with the FDA, and there were special, I can't even remember the name of it, but there's special regulation that allowed them to get it done. What would normally take 1.5 to 2 years took 8 weeks. And then they were able to deliver home testing. But there are, again, a number of organizations that I think are really doing some interesting things around values alignment. So Jessie Gould of Ox Verte was a office worker delivery meal service, and she switched her model to deliver to those office workers at home, but also to be one of the delivery mechanisms for GoFundMe campaigns that wanted to deliver to frontline workers and hospital workers.
So it's interesting that you say a realigning of values, because pivoting and reinvention goes beyond products and goes beyond creativity. I mean, hopefully our culture is changing, and that's a reinvention. And so obviously the pandemic, as you've all noted, has exposed these deeply entrenched disparities in the business world for women and minority-owned businesses. So Michelle is the head of Michigan's Minority Supplier Development Council, and I keep having to read that because I'll get it wrong. That was established precisely to address these inequities. So give us some perspective on that and what you think still needs to be done or what more needs to be done.
Sure. If you look at, and I think it's fascinating when you look at the history of supplier diversity. So I'll take us back a step. When you look at the 60s, when supplier diversity was born, it was literally born out of the riots of 1968 that followed Dr. King's death. That is when President Nixon put in place a commission to create what we now know as MBDA. The MBDA, the Minority Business Development Agency, operated out of the Department of Commerce, was one of the initial funding sources for the National Minority Supplier Development Council. That council was created as a direct result of the economic unrest that was taking place because of the disparities in the 60s. When you look at what's been accomplished, because keep in mind, the Minority Council didn't just help minorities, but it also helped women, and now LGBT and veteran, and those certifications are modeled after that initial. But it was all to deal with the economic disparity and unrest. I provide that history because I think oftentimes we think supplier diversity was created and it's a nice social program. The reality is it was created because the government realized that they could not identify enough solutions to bridge the gap in communities. And that's where I say minority and women-owned firms have the opportunity to really fill the gap. As I alluded to earlier, often our businesses are founded on the basic principle of being able to be the best in whatever product or service category that we're providing. But within that, most of the firms also have that the heart of the firm wanting to make a difference in people's lives. And these programs allow that to happen. So what I see following COVID-19, when we get there, is the ability for businesses to pivot, to reinvent their culture, to take a time of introspection and re-examining who they are and what they're about. Are they giving back enough? It's one thing for your organization to succeed, but do you have your own supply chain where you're ensuring that you're buying from other women-owned companies, or you're hiring women and giving them an opportunity to actually advance in key leadership operational roles so that we can continue the wealth creation that comes as a result of these programs. That's how our communities are changed. But I have to say, just as an aside, through COVID-19, one of the most exciting things, as you know, here in Michigan, we were helping to manufacture ventilators and invaluable equipment necessary through this crisis. Women-owned firms proved what I advocate for them every day. We can pivot, we can listen, we can be nimble, flexible, and quick to take care of needs. And we proved that through this crisis.
So reinvention could include getting certified as a women's business or a minority-owned business. Just for people out there who might not know, can you just tell them how to go about that and what it could mean for their business?
Certainly. Certification is kind of that secret weapon. There is a reason that in spite of the pandemic, the unrest, we have seen a nice uptick in the number of certification applications. And because of that, you'll see that we are rising to the occasion to meet those needs, as are our counterparts around the country. Certification will give you that additional push forward, shall I say. Our role is to ensure that the playing field becomes more level, and that we can introduce you to corporate partners. And those corporate partners can be major corporations or government agencies. We also identify ways for you to access capital, identify ways for you to access things like the Tory Burch Fellows. So we're constantly out there identifying resources that simply help you to be able to compete with whoever you are trying to win the race against, I should say, within your particular industry. Certification is very simple, so I would go to primarily the National Minority Supplier Development Council has affiliate councils throughout the country. There are 23 that do what we do. In addition to that, the Women's Business Enterprise National Council, WBENC, WBENC, those two websites, if you Google them, you will find a tremendous array of resources for you. The certification process is not an expensive one. It is one where we are ensuring that your business is legitimately owned, operated, and controlled by women or by minorities. But in exchange for that, our goal is to open the door for you to be able to go and compete.
So I just want to jump in just for a second and expand on that. So also go to your local and state governments because many of them have their own certification program. So I'm certified New York City. I do work for New York City Small Business Services. So some of them have very aggressive goals. So New York City has a goal within the next year to have reach 30% of procurement to be spent with women and minorities. So definitely check out your local government and your state government.
And just to build on what Michelle and Geri are saying, I think the third component that's really valuable, I am both certified by the NMSDC and WeBank. I just happen to be a woman of color. And what I can tell you that is an untapped, sometimes forgotten resource is the power of seeing and meeting role models. When I joined those councils over 20 years ago, Pinnacle was a $2 million company. And there is a lot of power in see it, be it. You've got to see people that are doing it. It makes it such a reality. I'll never forget going to the conferences. They have annual conferences, regional conferences, where I would go and I would see women that are running global companies and that I could say, you know what, if she could do it, I could do it too. Not to mention the relationships that are built. Michelle's point, that's how we met. That is how, that ecosystem is so powerful. I always like to say, make deposits in the bank of relationships. Michelle has been an incredible role model to me, an advocate, as you heard. And we need to support each other and celebrate each other. I'll never forget when she was named president of her regional council, the first woman to do so in the history of her council. You know, she is proverbially breaking that glass ceiling and being there physically and spiritually to just support her was really special to me. But building those relationships and that network of women that you can call friends, that share your values, more importantly, leadership is lonely. It is lonely at the top. You have to be able to have discussions with other women that are going through that or have been through that in their lives. They could give you some great advice. So for me, WeBank, NMSDC has been an invaluable place where I have met people that I now call friends.
Yeah. And so everybody knows, we think that this is such an important topic that we're going to be doing a webinar on getting certified. And we will have these links that Michelle talked about on our website, but we want to go deeper into this because, you know, connected to what Nina was just saying, organizations like Michelle's and what the states are doing, that's what can help us get beyond tokenism. And I think that's a lot of what the newest movement is about. You know, this isn't about the check the box and the one, you know, person of color in the photograph or in the team. So it's super, super important, and we want to support that as much as possible.
And if I could just add in there, today in America, the data is on our side. Right. What I love is that we've had 30 years, a generation of data, where in the past, to Michelle's point, supplier diversity was a nice social thing to do or the right thing to do. Today, it's a business decision. You know, the studies are there. They show you a diverse board, a diverse supply chain creates better profitability. And so now we have the data on our side, which is so helpful than it was 24 years ago when I first started out. So let's take advantage of that data. Women-owned businesses have been the fastest growing sector of small business in America. And in that sector, women of color are the fastest growing. So you have women of color being the fastest and most entrepreneurial section of America, yet get the least funding. And so, but now you have the data on our side to make that business. It is about good business.
That's so now I'll chime in.
No, I need to get in on this.
I knew I'd round them up.
One of the
we
things.
Just need the glass of wine and you'll be perfect right here.
So one of the, I hate to say that there were benefits of these crises, but to focus on disparity and the use of numbers. So really COVID-19 focused us on the data, highlighting the disparity for people of color and for women as a health issue. Then it came up as an economic issue, and then it came up as a social injustice issue. And Black Lives Matters now is sort of the culmination of everything. So I think when COVID-19 first came out, diversity and initiatives were actually going on the chopping block Black Lives Matters has really brought it up front and center. I interviewed Mandy Price of Canaries, a Dallas-based company, and they have a diversity and inclusion AI platform. They've seen a huge upsurge in interest from corporations, and that interest is spilling over into supplier diversity. So she then gets asked about how do you build a supplier diversity program?
So true. It's so true. And I know you're trying to move forward, Laurie, so I'll keep my comments. But I couldn't.
No, please.
Once you light that fire, you just gotta
I couldn't miss this because I think Geri and Nina are spot on. When we look at the opportunity that we have before us, I have never seen corporations and organizations from such a diverse array of backgrounds. I think the thing that has inspired me most about the peaceful protesters is the diversity within the group. And when you look at socioeconomics, you see everyone marching because we all realize collectively that until all of us are given opportunity, none of us will succeed as we can. The point I want to make here is I know there are corporations watching this broadcast. Many of you reached out to me on LinkedIn. This is where you have an opportunity to make a difference. I have been inspired by the letters and the statements of true concern about the injustice that many communities are facing. What we now must do with that, we don't need simply checks to be written to nonprofits, and there are excellent nonprofits receiving this support. The best way to ensure sustainable growth within these communities is to provide opportunities for women and minority-owned firms to compete for business. Those are the barriers we need to break down. More importantly than a $50 million check to a nonprofit that will likely do very good work with that is the opportunity for you to allow a business the ability to compete for a long-term relationship with you that then impacts communities where we all live, work, and play.
That's super, super important, Michelle. And I think one of the things all of us are thinking about and worrying about a little, quite frankly, is how do we make sure that the enthusiasm we're seeing today is converted into meaningful action. So I think all of us need to hold each other's feet to the fire and need to hold businesses' feet to the fire. And Geri, I know you will in print, and we have to, because we cannot let this moment pass without significant systematic change. And it, you know, in addition to the owners of companies, this has been really hard for employees. And Nina, as somebody who has a lot of employees, how have you been able to support your employees through what's sometimes a very difficult emotionally period right now?
You know, I find that communicating and being transparent reigns supreme. By the way, that's just good business. You should always be doing it. But nowadays, it's even more important. So what we have done is, you know, and I'm used to working people one-on-one, being in the office. It's my second home when I'm not on an airplane, and my life has completely changed. And there, you have to be sympathetic and empathetic to people. Some people thrive working at home. Some people are really challenged. But back to the communication and transparency, we have what we call global all hands meetings, and we get everybody around the globe on a phone call and communicate it began at a weekly basis. Now we're down to 2 and even 3-week basis. But what Pinnacle does is we use a lot of AI to track our metrics, our leading indicators and our metrics and those of our customers. And so I find that when you tell people what's happening, it gives them a level of, because if you don't tell people what's happening, they're going to make it up. And 9 out of 10 times, it's going to be worse in their mind. And so be transparent, be bold, be courageous, be transparent with your people, and communicate often. That's what we have done. The second thing we've done is I've actually really encouraged people to bring their whole selves to work. That means spiritually, mentally, physically, in every way. People are stretched. We are working double time. We have limited bandwidth. We have limited people. And this could be a very exhausting time. But you know what pulls people through is unwavering faith and the fact that you believe in them. The only thing that will pull you through is inspiration. And what is inspiration? Your values and living those every day. And so reminding them who, not just what they do, but who they are. Because I've even said, you know, we understand that we're going through a storm, but remember, Pinnacle is the storm. I mean, we've been one of the fastest growing companies in the nation for the last 13 years in a row. We are the storm. We're going to bring it on. And so it's important not just to remind them, not just what we do, but who we are. We're entrepreneurs at heart. We live the value of diversity every day. We're 66% women, 48% minorities. We stand tall on our record of diversity and giving back to our community. The more we grow, the more have our suppliers, small businesses inside our company. And so we know what path we're on. And when you're on the right path, the world conspires to help you. So that's often what, how I tend to motivate our crew.
Good.
So I think we're going to switch topics a little bit here and talk a little bit about capital, because the stats surrounding capital for women and minority-owned businesses are honestly dismal. And the first round of PPP was a disaster in getting to small businesses and minority-owned businesses. So, Geri, what are some of the alternative forms of capital that people should be considering right now?
So even before I get into some of the capital, different types of capital that are available, out of the past recession, the 2007, 2008 recession, came a lot of fintechs that are now serving the industry. So one form is rewards-based crowdfunding. So Indiegogo and Kickstarter came out of the last recession. And rewards-based crowdfunding is the one financing option that women outperform men. And they outperform men for 3 reasons. One, they are better marketers. They know how to pull at the emotional heartstrings. Their community comes around them, so that's number 2. And number 3, women are viewed as more trustworthy.
I'm refraining myself right now.
So over the last few years, I've sort of dedicated to myself to raising awareness of the array of financing options that are out there, because there's an overemphasis on venture capital. Less than 0.5% of companies are going to be raising venture capital. If that is a possibility for you, you need to understand the business model. So I find most entrepreneurs don't understand what venture capitalists are looking for. So they have stars in their eyes when it comes to venture capital. And there are cheaper forms of capital that are better for you. So I know you, Tory Burch, talk a lot about community development financial institutions, CDF Eyes. When you can't get a loan from a bank, these CDF Eyes provide loans to underrepresented entrepreneurs, and they're a little bit more expensive than a bank, but you're not going to get a loan from a bank if you're not in business for 3 years or more. So again, the more you know, the better your decisions are going to be. There are other financing options like invoice factoring. So you have invoices out there that can collateralize, in a sense, you getting financing for your business. So it could be, you could have contracts with government, with corporations, and you could get contract financing. You also can do merchant cash advances. So this happens to be a fairly expensive option, but if you take it for short periods of time, it can be an effective way for you to finance your business. So again, the more you know, the smarter you are about it. There's revenue-based financing, similar and different to merchant cash advance, meaning you're doing it based on your sales as opposed to your cash flow. A bank is looking at cash flow. Merchant cash advance and revenue-based financing are really looking at how fast you're growing, and that's what is in a sense, collateralizing the amount of money that you're getting. So I will be putting up a deck on my website in my contact area. Just give me a few days because I don't remember how to do it and I have to ask my virtual assistant to do it. But it aggregates all of my content and all of my content that I've written on Forbes about the different financing options and gives you pros and cons about each financing option.
So we'll have a link to Geri's site on our website. And I just also want to point out that the SBA just came out with a tool to connect you with CDF Eyes. And there's a link to that on our website as well. That just came out this week, I believe. But yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you, Geri. And Michelle, you know, we're seeing now how having a single source of revenue or limited supply chain can really, you know, bring a business down. How do business owners spread their revenue streams to strengthen their supply chains?
You know, we've seen so many excellent examples of this, and some of them came about as a result of crises. I think Nina's example that she gave earlier is an excellent one, as is the knitting firm that you talked about, and then pivoting, looking at new markets, new industry. We often tell our businesses, you must diversify your revenue streams. You must identify various markets, various customers, and we simply work with our business owners to be able to identify who those targets are so that prior to a crisis occurring, you've already identified how you're going to ensure that when one area of business might be down because it's determined by perhaps B2C, you still have your B2B firms. So at the end of the day, we have multiple businesses in Michigan, for example, that are manufacturing. Some of them are manufacturing. One of them I think about was manufacturing commercial syrups, like the syrups you have in your Starbucks coffee and things. But as this downturn started to occur and we started seeing that people weren't able to go to those retail establishments, we saw businesses very smartly start to pivot and say, if I have the FDA licensing for this, I can also perhaps package hand sanitizer in a period of time where it's really crisis and it's really critical. And if I'm going to do that, and I now recognize that PPE is very important, how do I make this a long-term so that it's not a temporary pivot just to solve the problem, but how do I truly reinvent and say, learn from this opportunity and figure out how I can continue to keep my B2B business running, but I can look at B2C. That's also where I would tell people, when you look at the trade agreements, and we've had a lot of conversation with them before we moved into the health crisis that became a economic crisis. But when you look at that, one of the very positive points of that is the need for US-based companies to partner with companies in Mexico, Canada, in terms of trade. That opens up an entire different opportunity stream for businesses willing to take that leap and to explore. So what I've advised to our people is, many times the best people in your company to help you figure out how to totally think outside the box are your staff, your employees. We often say the cliche that our people make the difference, but I will tell you, you have employees in the ranks, sitting at their desks, doing what they should. Well, their desk may be at home today, but they're there day in and day out. And many of them have ideas that we should be tapping into to say, how do we ensure that we have diverse revenue streams? Because in a low cash environment, it is all about leveraging that time to prepare for a future that allows that revenue to flow.
So I'm going to suggest thinking about it or providing a framework for thinking about it. So when I'm teaching, I teach Business Model Canvas, which has 9 categories that you might actually create diversified revenue streams around. So that could be your value proposition, that could be your relationship with customers, that could be your strategic partners. There's, again, 9 different ways. And all you have to do is Google it, but I'll also put a link up to a PowerPoint about Business Model Canvas up on my website.
I refer to it as the difference between working in the business and on the business. And when you're smaller and younger, You can have heroic efforts. You can work in the business along, help grow the business, because when you're smaller, revenue is king, right? Revenue is king. When you grow and mature into the mid-market or to a medium-sized business, the key thing is to have trade-offs, because now you have limited bandwidth. Limited time, and you cannot get away. You must work on the business. And what Michelle was talking about, working with your management team to stop, to think of, to collect your assets, and to think, what else could I be doing, and working on the business. And that takes a lot of discipline. Because when you're a small business and you've got your head down, you're working in the business, most of the time you love the business. You want to work in the business. Working on the business is hard. It requires discipline. It requires structure. It requires something very different. Heroes don't scale. You no longer depend on people, you depend on systems. You're making investments. You're creating structures for the long game. And that oftentimes I see some of the most entrepreneurial people, that's our challenge, is sitting down and working in the business. But I can tell you unequivocally, there will come a time where and I think the time is now, where you cannot afford to not work on your business. Working on your business.
Nina, you've also said that preserving cash is oxygen for a small business. How, in a crisis, though, can our small entrepreneurs preserve cash when they're just even trying to desperately hold on to it?
You know, the thing about failure is it brings a beautiful gift, and that is the gift of experience. And so 9/11 and the financial crisis of 2008 has taught us well about preserving cash. Back then, we learned a lot about diversification of your portfolio. In 2001, we learned a lot about diversifying your portfolio, the need and the importance of having a healthy balance sheet, of creating accruals in your company, having those accrual pools, crisis pools. All that has been a great teacher for us. In 2008, lowering your cost. That's when we started creating BPO facilities in Vietnam and in the Philippines and in Jordan. Preserving cash, healthy balance sheet. This is a discipline not of today. It's a discipline that needs to be consistent and throughout, and something to keep in mind. So it's kind of like people always say, I need a loan from the bank. I need a relationship with the bank. No, you need to do that ahead of time. So again, working on the business and the key things that need to happen before. And so preserving cash in a situation where there is not a lot is very challenging. It is absolutely challenging. The first thing that you have to do is cut unnecessary costs. Now, some of it has been done for you. We're not traveling. A lot of us aren't traveling. So our conference budget and our travel budget, but you have to really make difficult trade-offs in this environment of what really matters in the long game. And again, requires a lot of discipline. It's not sexy to talk about. It's really difficult to do, but the preservation of cash, I have been a tiger about integrity in your financials. That is the difference between making it or breaking it. Pinnacle started off with one service offering, to your point. 24 years later, we have 4 pillars and 9 service offerings. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens by reinvesting in the company, and having that disciplined approach of preserving cash and focusing all on the future of the company. Thinking the mindset of long game. We have to get into our mindset of not just today and tomorrow, but what's going to happen. Imagine what you can do in a 10-year period. So those are just some of my top of mind thoughts of preserving cash. It's difficult, but you've got to make those difficult decisions.
So as a very small company preserving cash, what I would encourage the audience to do is to go for a PPP loan as well as an EIDL loan. So that's allowing me to reduce costs. So my EIDL loan is going to pay down more expensive loans that I have, and my PPP loan hopefully will be forgiven, but that will underwrite some of the revenue loss that I have.
And, you know, another thing I didn't mention, which is, again, probably not a very popular topic of preserving cash if you're a small business. But this is what leadership is about, and that's putting yourself last. Putting yourself last as the chief executive officer is a way to preserve cash. And what I mean by that is stop drawing salary. And I know that's difficult, and some of you may not be able to do it. But when you think about your role as a chief executive officer of putting others first and yourself last, it's a difficult and challenging time. I had to do it in 9/11. I had to do it for several years. It was, but I think it showed a lot of people where my values were and what my intentions were to play the long game. It's not the first or last time I'll have to do it, but I think it's an important thing to understand about building a business.
Right. And I just have to say, I think both Nina and Geri have given sound advice, in particular for micro enterprises, those businesses under $1 million. What I would say is you're not in this alone. And I think often as women, if we don't feel like we have the answer right at our fingertips, it can become a very lonely place. And what I would say is I have seen corporations like Lowe's has announced that they have a fund for minority businesses. There are other corporations that are investing in funds. There are state governments and city governments that have programs that are allowing for grants, not even loans, to help the smaller businesses. McKinsey had a survey here in the last couple of months, and part of what they came back and said is there is the danger of almost losing 40% of minority-owned firms post-COVID-19. So many of those corporations that you saw putting letters out have also now backed that with some of these grant programs. So do not give up and begin to really scour and search for state, city, as well as private organizations that have grant programs.
So I know we haven't been asked to provide some resources, but since we are talking about financing, Hello Alice is a good resource for two reasons. One, they aggregate other people's grants, but they also are doing grants. And then another one is I Fund Women. So they are a rewards-based crowdfunding platform, but a lot of corporations like Hello Alice are coming to them to actually distribute grants.
And again, you will find all those links on the Tory Burch Foundation website. And two very, very important announcements. One is that PPP, the last day for applications is June 30th. So if you were thinking about it and didn't do it, you have to do it now. And the second is the EIDL loans that Geri referred to. Very importantly, they were shut down for quite a while, and now applications are open again for those EIDL loans. And they tend to be sometimes a much better option for particularly very small, single proprietor businesses. So please take a look at those links. And just to piggyback on what you're saying, and Michelle, you answered some of this question already, but we're finding that liquidity is really, really a problem for some of our entrepreneurs because they even have orders, but they don't have the money to get the raw materials even, or, whatever they need to fulfill orders. Geri, what do you recommend in that scenario?
So it actually really depends. So I do love rewards-based crowdfunding because you can pre-invoice people before you've built the product. That's not going to do you any good if you're servicing a large corporation. But again, CDF Eyes are often a go-to resource for me, depending upon how long you've been in business, perhaps a bank. And then to look at some of the alternative financing types, whether that is revenue-based financing or merchant cash advances.
Great. Okay.
I'll throw this out here. It's just a really quick, and I'll add it to the resources you'll provide after. If anyone on this call is in search of PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, or EIDL assistance, I will offer that assistance. Whether you are a minority-owned firm in Michigan, you can be a woman-owned firm anywhere in the country. And if you reach out to us, we will help you walk through that process and connect you to CDF Eyes in particular that are looking to serve people like you.
That's so
And
generous. Thank you, Michelle.
the only thing I have to add to that is this is a time for financial growth is important, but so is personal growth.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of programs and services out there that can help you as a leader personally grow. I'm a beneficiary of programs that I was scholarshiped by through NMSDC and through WeBank. So I was able to go to Dartmouth and Kellogg and Harvard, all in learning how to be a better leader. This is it might be an important time. So do your research, because there's a lot of resources. The Tory Burch Foundation, again, I was proud to nominate a small business, Latina-owned business, to be part of the program, and it changed her life. She now still runs her business, but now is getting a master's degree in Columbia. And so I think that personal growth is really critical and important as you're going through that journey. Take advantage of it. My website, ninavaca.com, I have links to all those scholarships that I have benefited from, because I think it's important not to just give inspiration, but to give information and to have others. And I'm proud to, I'll be happy to nominate anyone who needs a nomination within any of these programs. But I'll also provide those links on my website too. So don't forget the power of personal growth.
Right.
Wonderful, thanks. I'm going to try and squeeze in a couple audience questions here. And this is for any one of you. What are the most significant barriers you see to adapting to changes in how we need to conduct business now? What will be the impact when everyone's new normal is the same?
I'm going to say mindset. So really adapting an agile, curious mindset is really critical during these times. So number one, to be resilient. So these are really hard times. You tend to close down, and you need to be actually looking outward, talking to people, opening yourself up, and being very curious. Certainly attending other training programs can help, but also talking to peers. So getting that peer support is really important as well.
And Antonella just asked, in our company, we've taken advantage of the crisis to care and talk more deeply, especially with our youngest employees. We would like to ask how to provide training, and is it better speaking with them or using web, social, more modern resources?
I don't think it's an either or. I think it's critical that you use several different things. You could do something as simple as a Zoom, but I think it's also important to have small snippets of information. So you could have videos that are on demand, that are literally almost like TED Talks, where you feature executives really talking about this and how it aligns with your company culture. But I don't think it's an either or. I think a model that deploys all types of media, you'll find will likely serve you best.
Great. Another question is, what unique advice do you have for African-American women entrepreneurs during this time of economic depression, COVID, physical and mental health disparities, and widespread recognition among Americans of the systematic racism that African-American women face daily?
Don't give up. Persistence pays. Do not give up. This is literally a time, and I think it was you, Geri, that talked about never waste a crisis. We are in the middle, as a woman of color, you're in the middle of multiple crises happening at one time. I think it was heart-wrenching for all of us to see the COVID-19 disparities in those who were dying within communities of color. I think you then walked into an economic uncertainty and crisis with the number of people on the street who found themselves unemployed by no fault of their own. And then I think you now see this period of civil unrest. There's tremendous opportunity latent within that if you can see beyond the simple short-term issues and say, how can I now mobilize to make a difference so that we don't go back to 1968? One of the most astonishing things for me was going back and reading some of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speeches from the 60s and seeing that if you remove the word Negro, they could apply today. It says we've not made enough of a difference, and at the end of the day, it will take those of us who believe in the power within ourselves and within those around us to make a difference, to continue to challenge all of those barriers and to charge forth, as Nina said, because we are the force.
I can't agree more. I've always said, don't get mad, get motivated. These statistics that are now being brought up are not new. They are not new. These have existed, and they're bringing light to challenges that have existed, not only for African-American entrepreneurs, but for entrepreneurs of color. We just talked about women-owned businesses being the fastest growing segment of American small business, and the women of color being the fastest growing in that segment. So I agree with everything both Michelle and Geri have said. It is a time to not be mad, but be motivated. Or maybe you can be mad, but turn that emotion into action, turn that emotion into motivation, to lean in and to really understand how your business your industry works, and lean into growing and advancing your personal business, but don't give up.
I would just add, I think that it's also for white women and white allies to realize what our Black, friends are going through, and to reach out and help where we can. It is harder. There is more on them right now. And I think that we all have to do what we can to support each other, and especially Black women right now.
I can't
I
tell
would,
you how
yeah.
much I appreciate that. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate that. That is, at the end of the day, the power that we have is whoever is marginalized, whether that's a person with a physical limitation or a person of color or a woman, those who are not marginalized, speaking and advocating on those who are, that's where the power of change really comes into play. So thank you for that.
And amplifying the voice.
One, I think, do we have, one quick last question maybe, or you know what, I'm gonna go, we only have a couple minutes. Any closing words of wisdom from you ladies? First of all, I cannot say thank you enough. It's just been dynamite to have you here, and please let us invite you back for whatever topic that comes up in this way. But just any last words of wisdom about resources or tips?
Mine is simple. Never give up. Persistence pays. This is an opportunity.
Right.
I agree, and I want to say, I really want to thank the Tory Burch Foundation. I've had the opportunity and the pleasure to meet Tory herself, and I know this comes from a place of authenticity. I know she truly cares, and she's done it by leveraging her name and leveraging her brand and leveraging her dollars. And so the ripple effect, again, of what we're doing here today is going a long way. I personally am always happy when I can be of value. If my personal experiences or story can inspire others, I hope people in the audience are saying, if she can do it, so can I. But know that you are not alone, and that you are surrounded by people who share your same values and share your same positive ambition. It's okay to be ambitious. It's okay to have positive ambition. Wealth creation is not a dirty word. It's the way that we are going to advance our communities and advance our country, because our country will benefit. I think the mistake we make is just focusing on certain sectors and ethnicities, when we should focus on our entire country. So if we work together, I think we really can make a difference. And it's been a pleasure and an honor to be part of that solution.
So I will echo Nina, and what a pleasure it is to be with all of you at this moment. And I would just encourage everybody to lean into the crisis, because out of crisis comes moments of opportunity, innovation, and disruption.
Thank you again. I just have a couple things to say to wrap up. You can find more information about a lot of what we discussed about on the Tory Burch Foundation website, especially under our financial FAQ section. And if you missed any of our past episodes, you can watch all of those episodes also on our website, on our YouTube channel. Our next webinar is going to be Wednesday, July 8th, because of the holiday, and we'll be sending around an email with the topic. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to our amazing guests. Please, let's go out and have some wine together as soon as we can. Just maybe drinks, lots of drinks, not even wine. Thank you for joining again, and thank you to our dynamite guests.
Yeah,
Take
thank
care.
you.
Pleasure. Pleasure's all mine.
Bye.
Thanks.